Star Wars The Force Unleashed is perhaps the most important piece of Star Wars material outside of the films. Marketed as the in-between chapter between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, The Force Unleashed tells the incredible story of Darth Vader's secret apprentice, Starkiller. The Force Unleashed was released in 2008, in the era of peak prequel hate, but was well received because of its story. The Force Unleashed is one of the greatest all-time Star Wars games. One that George Lucas himself had heavy involvement, not to mention that it's an old childhood memory of mine. I remember playing this game on Nintendo DS when I was like 7 or 8, so I had quite the history with this game. For this video, we will be reviewing the high-definition version of The Force Unleashed, although I will give my simplified thoughts on the DS and last generation versions. And by last generation, I mean at the time. So the PlayStation 2 and the Wii. The Force Unleashed started as a project in summer 2004. LucasArts was conceptualizing a new Star Wars game, and ideas ranged from a Wookiee protagonist to Darth Maul, before the decision came to set it in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. Concept art greatly helped the visualization between the two periods for the developers. A year later, George Lucas recommended the idea of making a story about Darth Vader and his secret apprentice. The story was conceptualized for 6 months, with George discussing with the developers things like Vader's relationship to the Emperor and what Vader would want out of an apprentice if he ever had one. This very story debunks the idea that the expanded universe was merely non-canon. It's more accurate to say that the expanded universe was secondary canon to George Lucas's vision. I do wish George Lucas himself would clarify this, but oh well. Sequel fans, when they talk about the expanded universe, are too stupid to understand it. Like, when it comes to sequel fans, they always skirt around and dodge the problems people actually have, not trying to understand the proper reason people hate the sequels. Well, back to The Force Unleashed. George Lucas was a huge part of The Force Unleashed, and is one of the expanded universe projects that he was most involved with. The Force Unleashed was released on September 16th, 2008. Although Starkiller's first appearance was in Soul Calibur 4, a fighting game in which Darth Vader and Yoda were also featured among the roster, although I'm here to review The Force Unleashed, not the fighting game. If I'm going to review any fighting game, it's going to be Masters of Terra's Kasai. So let's begin. The main theme for starters is excellent. The score for The Force Unleashed, aside from the John Williams music, was composed by Mark Griskey, who also composed Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. The main theme is grandiose, yet has a sinister-like atmosphere to it all, and it perfectly feels like a theme for the character of Starkiller. The game starts with a title crawl. As always, Disney has to start learning to use it for Christ's sake. The title crawl establishes the Empire's dominance over the galaxy, and during the Imperial invasion of Kashyyyk, Darth Vader has been sent to the planet after learning of a hidden Jedi on the planet. The time frame puts this around a year after Revenge of the Sith, and Darth Vader, being a central character, is seen getting out of a shuttle, and the character is perfectly in line with the one seen in the original trilogy: cold, ruthless, and uncaring. Matt Sloan is the voice of Darth Vader in this game, and he's the dude I vouch for voicing Vader when James Earl Jones retires or dies. Over the many Vader voice actors over the years, Matt Sloan is the one I recommend. Although who's willing to bet they're gonna get some campy crap actor to portray Vader in the future? Matt Sloan perfectly embodies James Earl Jones' performance of the character, and while you can tell it's a different voice actor, it doesn't really matter because it's very close. The opening cutscene has Darth Vader march forward, not reacting to Imperial soldiers dying or TIE fighters getting destroyed, further establishing how little he cares about the Empire and its troops. And of course, the incompetent officer makes excuses and Vader chokes him, expressing that he doesn't want to have his time wasted before letting the officer go. So our first taste of gameplay is something I thoroughly enjoy. Not only do we get to play as Darth Vader, but the controls are something I really enjoy. In my Fallen Order video, I talked about this game quite a bit, and I enjoy the Force Unleashed gameplay insanely more than Fallen Order. The Force Unleashed is the kind of game that's easy to pick up and has a decent amount of challenge, even on the easiest amount of difficulty. Fallen Order relies on timed attacks, while the Force Unleashed has a lot more combos in combat. The lightsaber in this game feels absolutely lethal. Every hit punctures the enemy, and you feel the hit subconsciously. In my Fallen Order video, I complained about how the lightsaber feels like a baseball bat. While in this game, while nothing can be cut into pieces, it does feel like a lightsaber, although more like a heavy weapon given the feeling of the combat. The gameplay is well animated. Combo movesets are perfect and catchy to the eyes, if that makes sense. Like if you had an actual toy lightsaber, you'd want to replicate Vader or Starkiller if you saw the animations enough times for them to be burnt into your retina. This is the prologue mission, where you essentially fight your way through Wookiees, and we get a taste of the style this game has. The Force Unleashed allows you to use the Force to a ridiculous degree, like this part, where we push an entire large gate down with the Force. The physics are great. I love how absolutely everything is reactive. The walls, the ground, objects, and of course, enemies and NPCs. Wookiees, despite the stories about how tough and strong they are pretty easy. This is the first level after all, but even for a first level, they are extremely fun to fight in combination with the physics. The feeling of the lightsaber and abilities we have are Force power exclusive to the prologue is the Force choke. Given Vader can't use lightning like McQueen, and the Force Unleashed Kashyyyk actually looks like Kashyyyk as seen in Revenge of the Sith. Fallen Order's Kashyyyk looks like the crazy jungle with that movie with The Rock in it. Eventually, we make it to a hut with an interesting looking symbol. As we come across the Jedi, named Kento American External Material, voiced by the retired Tom Kane, and given his talent, I don't want his work to be forgotten. Anyways, Kento America's our first boss fight is pretty easy. A thing to know about the game are that lightsaber enemies are uncommon and usually saved for boss battles. So it makes the Jedi and Sith fights feel unique because they are rare. Kento Marek is pretty predictable and not too hard to beat. When he loses enough health, we are put into a quick time event. Pretty much every boss fight has a quick time event. Some see quick time events as lazy, but I think it's perfectly acceptable here. First, the boss fight is pretty much over, and second, the quick time events are creative as they full embody the title, aka the Force Unleashed. I mean, it could just be a cutscene, but what's the harm? Defeating the Jedi, he is at the Dark Lord's mercy, and in one of the greatest character establishment scenes in Star Wars gaming, Vader asks about a powerful presence he feels nearby, before having his lightsaber taken by a young boy, the son of the rogue Jedi. Vader kills the Jedi, and then towers over the boy. The Imperial officer from earlier with a squad of stormtroopers come into the hut, see the boy, and the officer signals for the boy to be murdered. But in a rare case of decency, Darth Vader protects the boy and kills the entire squad, establishing how the boy became Vader's apprentice. This is Starkiller, a character with far more intrigue and development than Ahsoka Tano. Anakin was essentially given two apprentices in the same year, one being created by the overrated cowboy Dave Filoni, and the other being created by Hayden Blackman. Comparing the two characters, unless you're a simp, Starkiller is the way better character of the two. And I'm not saying that because Starkiller is a male human and Ahsoka is an alien female, you SJW morons. Starkiller is a way more developed character, and unlike Ahsoka, he is actually a plausible part of the Star Wars universe that George Lucas created. Ahsoka is cramped in between two movies, and her existence destroys continuity. Also, Starkiller would destroy Ahsoka like a rag doll in a fight. Someone needs to put the two characters up against each other at some point. Although, who's willing to bet if Disney does that, Starkiller is going to lose for a contrived reason. This is like what I said about Delta Squad versus the Bad Batch. Disney would just have their version win. Anyways, enough with the Ahsoka rant. I just used her to show you the difference, as Starkiller is conceptually sound. The time jump lets us see Starkiller as a late teenager, although it's hard to tell given the character's likeness and voice as Sam Witwer, who was in his early 30s at the time. Sam Witwer is a real god of a voice actor. He brought the Clone Wars Darth Maul to life, even if Maul's resurrection made no fucking sense. I think Starkiller is his best voice acting role, but nowadays people associate him with him being the second Maul voice actor. I mean, he can do a lot with his voice. Anyhow, Darth Vader sends him on his first true mission, a Jedi named Ram Koda is attacking Imperial shipyards. Vader instructs Starkiller to leave no witnesses, to kill everyone including the Imperials and Koda's men, and he will bring him his lightsaber. We also get a setup for Starkiller's motivation as Vader's apprentice, the Emperor. Vader says only together they can defeat him. I like this part. You see, even though it's a prequel and the destination is set, just like the prequel trilogy, the story creates intrigue. Players with open eyes will notice the rebel symbol on the hut in the start of the game, and so the wonder of how Starkiller ties into the rebellion is interesting. It's the hook that gets you invested. But what stays a mystery is Starkiller's personal story. Since I hammered the Battlefront 2 EA for not doing so, The Force Unleashed explains the why over the what. Why is Starkiller motivated to do Vader's bidding? Because he believes they will overthrow the Emperor. Because that means he will serve as Vader's side as his enforcer. Because that will give him the chance to overthrow Vader as Emperor. And so on and so forth. It's a pretty simple motivation, but given how Vader raised him, it makes sense. But it's not like Starkiller has no personality beyond that. As we see in the next scene after his orders from Vader, we cut to Obi-Wan Kenobi having the high ground. I guess the meme was ahead of its time, and ambushes Starkiller, who defeats Kenobi where it's revealed that it's not Obi-Wan at all, but Proxy, who is like the best friend character to Starkiller. He's a lot like HK-47, with his quirk being that he's programmed to keep Starkiller on his feet and try to kill him, but despite that, he and Starkiller are quite close as friends. He serves as a comic relief of sorts, and his cool gimmick is that he can beat anyone. Thus why we saw him turn into the guy who had the high ground. Starkiller sees his pilot, Juno Eclipse, and in a more believable manner than Iden and Del, his infatuation begins. Of course, we see that Proxy has biographies on practically everyone they come across. Juno Eclipse comes around to see what the two are talking about, and the natural banter between the three is more developed than, again, Iden and Del. Starkiller also mentions how Vader killed his last pilot. Yikes. Anyways, after the tutorial, we get an establishment scene for Ram Koda, and they do manage to come up with quite an interesting backstory. According to what Proxy tells us, Ram Koda was a Jedi general during the Clone Wars, but unlike those other Jedi generals gunned down by their clones, Ram Koda mistrusted clones, and this mistrust saved his life. When Order 66 was initiated, he had a completely non-clone militia, and they refused the order, being loyal to Koda. Just by this backstory, Ram Koda certainly seems like an interesting individual. His story must be right with lore since his first appearance, right? Well, I think you know what happened 5 years later. So now we get our first gameplay as Starkiller. As Vader instructed, we are to leave no witnesses. So both factions are an enemy. We murder stormtroopers and rebels alike. My mother, when she saw me play this game once, asked me why I was killing rebels in a Star Wars game. My response was a simplification of what was happening. The TIE Fighter factory is an industrial setting, far different in contrast to the first level. Another praiseworthy thing about the game is that the planets we visit are all unique. It reminds me of how George Lucas liked making all 6 Star Wars movies, tonally and visually different from each other. With that being said, this level also has its own set of unique enemies. There's stormtroopers and different classes of Koda's militia. This is around the time you really experiment with your powers. The over-the-top nature of the game was certainly done justice. The Force in this game, like Force Grip, allows for freedom of movement with whatever you grab. And I like the detail where the enemies will grab onto another enemy if you manage to touch them. The environments in every level are fully reactive, which must have been a great innovation at the time, that being 2008. Force Unleashed never gets boring on a full playthrough because it manages to make the environments, enemies, and levels all completely different. They also get creative with the types of enemies that exist, one of which is the construction ATST, which we destroy. The game, even on the easiest difficulty, is great, with no complaints with the learning curve. Eventually, we encounter Master Ram Koda, who underestimates us and pays dearly for it. Ram Koda is not too different from the first boss battle, that being easy and dodgeable if you're good at the game. So with that being said, we defeat Ram Koda, and they manage to make the end of the boss fight relatively interesting, revealing that he can sense Starkiller's future, and to his own surprise, that he will train him at a later point. Starkiller blinds him and throws him to Nar Shaddaa below. Returning to Vader, we are put to the test of killing another Jedi. On paper, this sounds like a repeat of the last level, but it isn't. Kazdan Paratus on Raxus Prime is actually quite creative. We go to a junk planet, and we face even more enemies than we did in the last level. Rodian scavengers, Jawas, force-powered machines. This is stuff you'd never see in Disney canon ever. Unless they decided to plagiarize this game, of course. Also, there's a lot of junk to throw around. Despite the drab setting, Raxus Prime made for one hell of a level. We even fight sub-bosses called Junk Titans. We essentially have to fight these large titans and do a button combo at the end to destroy them. My strategy is to always jump attack them. Kazdan Paratus is oh so great. He jumps all over the place, throws stuff at us that we have to defeat occasionally to get a shot at him again. When we defeat him, we of course get another Jedi to kill for our final test. But even though we've killed 2 Jedi already, it feels far from a waste of time, because the level surrounding the Jedi is also quite different to the one where we kill Ram Koda or Kazdan Paratus. You see, the environment, structure, and enemies of the first 2 levels were completely different from each other. So even though we're doing something again, it doesn't feel like it. And also these Jedi battles go to show how powerful Starkiller is. How could he survive battles with Jedi and come out on top? Our next target is Shaak Ti, a character who we all know and love, if you have an Ahsoka fetish that is, from the prequel trilogy. Anyways, we get some exposition between Shaak Ti and her apprentice Maris Brood, setting up another character for later. When the level starts, I did get a sort of Fallen Order kind of feeling when we're reminded of the Clone Wars in this level, given this is where Aayla Secura was killed. So anyways, the enemies in this level are Felucians, those that draw upon the Force, as well as Rancors as well. We've also got a part where we have to climb a fungus thing to proceed. There's a lot of flora and fauna that is out to kill you. Eventually, we come across Shaak Ti, and we fight her as well. This boss fight is oh so different because of the fungus all around, and the fact that enemies assist Shaak Ti. And also because in the second half of the boss fight, we go near the Sarlacc pit and we must avoid it. Defeating Shaak Ti, she warns Starkiller about Sith betrayals before falling into the pit. Returning to Vader, he backstabs his apprentice and reveals the Emperor's spies followed them there. Sidious, voiced by Sam Witwer as well, so that's quite a large voice range, orders Vader kill his apprentice, and Vader complies. He throws Starkiller around like a ragdoll unsympathetically, and the animation and the voice acting, plus the music really shows us that it looks quite painful and harmful. But this is far from the end. Starkiller is retrieved by some droids and wakes up some months later. Starkiller, despite being pissed, is eventually submissive and agrees to listen to Vader. Vader says that he still has his goal to destroy the Emperor, and that he will need to set up a rebellion that will serve as a distraction. Starkiller is to gain enough allies and use the rebellion to distract the Emperor. So the mission starts, and let me say, this might be one of the best levels in the game. There's a load of new Imperial enemies, including Shadow Troopers, the trademark enemy in this game, plus the Purge Trooper. Oh, I forgot. That's why they got the names for the Purge Troopers in Fallen Order. I forgot to criticize that. Well anyways, it also turns out that the Purge Troopers are also the predecessor to the Dark Troopers. Also a trooper Disney stole from Dark Forces. Damn, I really need to get into playing all the games. Well anyways, this is also the level where we collect a blue lightsaber crystal. Again, the reactivity and environment of this level make this level timeless. We essentially have to save Juno Eclipse, and Proxy also shut off the escape pods. Banger. We free Juno, and basically we progress the story. Now, I like that no matter how many levels there are, there's absolutely no filler in them whatsoever. Unlike some other Star Wars products we shall not name here. Like, they managed to come up with a story that's organically long, and not just a waste of your fucking time. Shocking, I know. Starkiller, once off the ship, talks to Juno about how he needs a master who could just teach him things Vader couldn't, before realizing what General Koda said to him above Nar Shaddaa. So we go to Cloud City. Okay, guess this game is a bit fan servicey. I think it would have been better to have this level be on Nar Shaddaa, but I didn't write this game. Anyways, Ram Kota's certainly changed since we last saw him. He's a bitter, broken and blind old man, one who constantly drinks alcohol. He's a shell of what we saw him in the original trilogy. And I like it. It's very distinct. His personality is also completely changed noticeably. If I had to choose a character besides Starkiller to be my favourite, it would be Master Ram Kota. And that's because even though he's an old man, he still has an arc in this story. One of coping with his disability and going back to what he used to be. It's quite inspirational. But for now, Ram Kota during the level is quite sloppy. We fight locals as well as Imperial guards, some of which have blue coatings, and the one at the end is a shadow guard. I have that sitting in my pop collection actually. So with that being said, this escort mission is far from hard, which is the way I like it. I hate when you're supposed to defend something and it's hard to do so, and damn is the shadow guard tough as hell. He blocks a lot of my attacks. It was just constant mashing of the buttons that I defeated him. Oh, and there's also the Cloud City forklift thingy. We're not explicitly told who we're looking for, although an earlier cutscene made it clear it was Princess Leia. We start the Kashyyyk mission by encountering an old hut. Starkiller vaguely remembers the hut, and decides to go inside, where he sees his father as a Force ghost, who briefly expresses his regrets before disappearing into the cosmic force. Starkiller is shaken by this experience, and this is a piece of his arc in this story. Starkiller makes it through a bunch of enemies. These aren't really new ones in this level, although it's not a bad thing. And then we've got Captain Osric Stern as a boss at the end. Now, Osric Stern is voiced by Tom Kane as well, which makes it suck even harder that his stroke means he's retired. Well anyways, we meet Princess Leia, who tells us to create a distraction for the Wookiees and cause an uprising. Even if it is brief, we destroy some pillars, and that's the end of this mission. Next mission, we're going back to Felucia. I did find it kind of strange how we returned to planets the first time I played this, but this is hardly an issue because we're shown all these planets under Imperial occupation because of what we did. It's a representation through gameplay that we done goofed. Anyways, Imperial Felucia is interesting. We see at the start that Bail Organa, voiced by the film actor Jimmy Smits, which was certainly better utilised in his role in Rogue One, has been captured by Maris Brood. So that's a good Chekhov's gun. Imperial Felucia is pretty distinct from the original Felucia level. As bar our actions here, Felucia is completely controlled by the Empire, and they're harming the wildlife. Where's the Environmental Protective Act when you need it? Well, point is, we even go into the stomach of a Sarlacc, which is cool. I always wanted to see what one of these looked like. We eventually get to Bail Organa, where we have a run-in with Maris Brood and her Rancor. We kill the Rancor. Maris Brood as a boss fight is also unique. She relies on sneak attacks, so it's vital to keep your eyes peeled and to have fast reflexes. We spare her after defeating her, and with that, we've got one more task before we can assemble the rebellion. We have to attack an Imperial shipyard above Raxus Prime. So we do just that. Again, seeing the Empire on the planet further shows us our actions have consequences. So we get around to fighting Proxy, who transforms into different training models before turning into Darth Maul. A minor nitpick I do have is that Proxy has the Force for some reason, which I'm to assume is just an artificially created energy field or something. Defeating Proxy, we get to the worst part of the game. Anyone who's played this game, at least the HD versions, knows this part. Basically, we have to pull a Star Destroyer down from the sky. First, we have to destroy TIE fighters, and once they're gone and they can't shoot you, you have to precisely grip the Star Destroyers and pull it down. You'd think this might take a minute, but no, it takes forever. I didn't even understand what the hell I was supposed to do until my playthrough for this video. I never actually completed this part until now. I only know of the ending because of the Wii and DS version of this video, where you didn't have to do this long time event, the opposite of a quick time event. I would never do this part again. And if The Force Unleashed is ever remade like KOTOR, that they can cut this out or make it easier. Because this was the biggest pain in the ass. Anyways, we take that Star Destroyer down after a couple of hours of non-stop trying. Anyhow, I finally did it for the first time, and there was a huge celebration coming from the serial plagiarist, that's me. With that being said, we've assembled our rebellion. With Bail declaring the rebellion, Ram Koda eventually comes around, and even though he's blind, he's regained his connection to the Force. But the worst happens. The Empire shows up, with Vader heading the assault. It's revealed here that he betrayed Starkiller. It's not surprising, but it's still a kicker in the nuts. Given this is before Vader had any sort of redemption arc, Vader is unapologetic as all hell. Starkiller is pissed at him, and Vader's just like,
I lied, as I have from the very beginning.
Before throwing Starkiller off a cliff. Proxy does try to fight him with the Obi-Wan model, but I guess Vader's learnt his lesson from the high ground. So Proxy's gone. Of course, Starkiller gets picked up by Juno Eclipse, and this is where Starkiller finally reveals his naivety. He realizes that Vader just needed him to root out the Emperor's enemies. Vader never planned to destroy the Emperor, at least not with him. Nah, he'd do that with his actual son, not his adopted one. So with that being said, Starkiller and Juno track where they took the rebels to the Death Star that is still under construction. What a cool idea for a final level. The Death Star is a bit spaced out, but within the context of the game and how it was designed, it's fine. Mostly, you have to avoid the Death Star laser every 30 seconds or so. Eventually, we get to the Emperor's throne room area, where we are to defeat our master, Darth Vader. I am going to question on how Starkiller managed to defeat Darth fucking Vader, but I'm guessing the explanation being a hint of weakness on Vader's part. Or maybe he cared about Starkiller more than he admitted. I'm not sure. I think it is explained in the novelization, but that's a discussion for another time. We overpower the Master, and the game actually lets us decide how it ends. We are given a choice. Vader is badly damaged and on the brink of death, but at the same time, the Emperor is slowly killing Ram Koda. Starkiller, and by the extension the player, must decide what to do. I'm willing to bet that most people decided to finish off Vader, but for the sake of this review, I want to discuss the light side ending first, aka the one Starkiller canonically chose to do so. Starkiller faces the Emperor head on and manages to defeat him. He's about to kill him in anger, but Ram Koda sways him away from giving into his hatred. The Emperor pulls some Force lightning on Starkiller, and Starkiller holds back the lightning, while Ram Koda and the other rebels escape. Starkiller goes out in a Michael Bay explosion, and the music was brilliantly used in this scene. Given Vader survived his near-imminent death, he looked down at Starkiller. It is hard to tell if he was at all affected from his death, but that's up for speculation. The Emperor discusses how their plan backfired, and now the only advantage they have now are who the rebel leaders are now. Meanwhile, the rebels gather on Kashyyyk and they decide to use Starkiller's family crest as the symbol of the Rebel Alliance. Too bad that was ruined in the continuity reboot. As time goes on, it becomes clearer and clearer that they're not doing Starkiller. Nah, the Rise of the Rebellion is just a less interesting and generic version of how things happened. It is insightful to learn that the Emperor was the one who came up with the rebellion and it backfired immensely, but it was drawn from the idea of defeating the rebellion before it began, which shows the brilliant scheming of Emperor Palpatine, and also showed us that his plans didn't always work. He improvised when things didn't go the way he planned. This is something people didn't understand or catch on about the prequels. As for the dark side ending, if the player chooses to kill Vader and have his revenge, Vader is killed and Starkiller learns the trap of the dark side the hard way, as the rebels were killed when he was wasting time killing Vader, and is turned into the Emperor's slave, like Vader before him. So that's both endings of the game looked at. Both were effective, one was heartfelt and triumphant, the other was dark and cruel. So both ways, the endings are equally efficient. Now we should briefly discuss the DLCs. There's 3 bonus missions in the HD version of the game. One is set during the main story, and has Starkiller go to the Jedi Temple and discovers the legacy of his father, and the other 2 are missions that reflect the dark side ending. And although it kind of just flips the script, it's fun regardless, fighting even more characters from the movies. In the Tatooine mission, once you kill Obi-Wan, you also eradicate his ghost out of existence. Why? Because bustin' makes you feel good. As well as that, You do the one thing Vader could never do. You defeat Luke Skywalker and he becomes Lord Starkiller's apprentice. And you know, that actually makes sense. Darth Vader was held back by Luke being his son. Given Starkiller has no ties to Luke, unless you accept the idea that they are kinda like stepbrothers, given Vader pretty much raised Starkiller and was adopted, he had nothing holding him back from fully defeating Luke Skywalker. All 3 missions are well designed as the base game, and thank God you don't need to level up in them. So to summarize The Force Unleashed, that's quite a solid experience. The story, the gameplay, and the presentation, and even the graphics for its time are all great. I've said in my Republic Commando video that even if some of the Star Wars games weren't the best, the passion was certainly there. Like, what I mean is, just like the Lucasfilms, it doesn't feel like there was any corporate interference, which is refreshing for a game of this scale. It's a rarity. Also, to sum up this video, the SD version of The Force Unleashed is pretty solid, and the DS game is just a piece of clunky crap. So with that being said, the HD version of The Force Unleashed gets a 9 out of 10. Certainly worth playing today. So with The Force Unleashed fully reviewed, I would like to get to the sequel that we all know and love. That's a joke, but I'm going to give the game a second chance, and see if it's underappreciated given the crap Disney and EA put out. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories by mystery boxes?
Your former glories and all your stories, dragged and washed with